According to Albert Breer, the New York Jets have limited interest in wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. What would a DeAndre Hopkins trade look like, and what can we do to the salary cap to make sure that we can fit DeAndre Hopkins on this team?
Inside, and a beauty! Hall, running free! Brees Hall inside the 10! He's gonna score!
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking Jets with Tigo. My name is Tigo, and today we're going to be talking about DeAndre Hopkins. And what does a DeAndre Hopkins trade look like? What would it mean for the New York Jets? And specifically, let's talk about the cap hit, because that's where I think a lot of Jets fans seem to be concerned, and they're like, well, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be worth $19.5 million this year, $15 million next year. If we weren't willing to pay OBJ $15 million this year, how are we going to get DeAndre Hopkins? Well, let's start from the top. What would a trade for DeAndre Hopkins look like? And I guess the best example in my mind for what DeAndre Hopkins' trade is going to look like is I would imagine it's going to be a lesser value for whatever the Houston Texans got for Brandon Cooks. Now, why is it a lesser value? Well, one, I believe that Brandon Cooks is actually younger than DeAndre Hopkins, and yep, he's 29. DeAndre Hopkins is 31. The other thing that we need to take into consideration when it comes to, the Brandon Cooks and DeAndre Hopkins comparison, and I don't like comparison being the best word, but the Brandon Cooks trade part of it is the Brandon Cooks contract is insanely better than what the DeAndre Hopkins trade looked like. Brandon Cooks' cap hit this year is $6 million and then $10 million next year versus the $19.5 million this year and the $15 million next year. And then we have to talk about DeAndre Hopkins does have an injury history that we have to think about. So that's why I think that the trade packages are probably going to be very similar for DeAndre Hopkins and Brandon Cooks. I think that's the baseline. My expectation would be that it might be like a 6th round pick this year and a 6th round pick next year probably gets the deal done for Arizona. They want to get out from under that contract. He's a $30 million cap hit. They saved $9 million by moving on from him. They know that they're not going to be very good and productive, and they're just trying to get as many assets as possible and to move on from a contract that has a massive cap implications for them. So there's that side of it, right? Now let's talk about the salary cap side of things. Let's say the New York Jets do go out and get DeAndre Hopkins. Let's say even the trade goes for a little bit more than what I recommended. How do we fit the contract of DeAndre Hopkins on the team? So like I said before, whenever you trade for a player, the prorated bonus gets all dumped to the team that's keeping him. Right? So they would take a $21 million dead cap hit this year because he's supposed to be paid a bonus of $10 million next year and this year. So they take that prorated bonus dump this year while all of the salary goes to the new team. And the salary for this year is $19,450 when you look at the numbers, $19,450,000. And that's what the New York Jets would get on board with. Now, the expectation would be that if you went for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, how do we get his number down to where probably Corey Davis's contract is? Because then we can cut Corey Davis or trade Corey Davis or do one of those things. Well, actually, it's pretty easy. If you take and convert $10 million from DeAndre Hopkins' salary into signing bonus and then add 3 void years on top of his contract so that his contract would essentially be a 5-year contract with the last 3 years automatically being void day one of the new calendar year, what you can do is have DeAndre Hopkins be an $11.5 million dead cap hit this year. Sound familiar? That's the exact cap hit for Corey Davis. And what you would do is next year you would raise his cap hit from 15 million to 17 million because you would take $2 million in prorated bonus next year. But remember that the New York Jets have a ton of cap space next year. And then in 2025, 2026, and 2027, we would eat $2 million worth of dead cap hit up against the salary cap. Now, we all know that the salary cap is going to explode next year, and carrying a $2 million dead cap hit over the back 3 years of the contract isn't going to be that big of a deal. And we have enough space to fit DeAndre Hopkins under the salary cap for next year. We have, as of right now, close to $86 million in cap space next year. So that being said, fitting him under the salary cap would be insanely easy. Now, if we were willing to take on more dead cap hit in those next couple of years, and even take a bigger cap hit next year so that we can lower the salary cap this year, we can absolutely do that too. You can lower his base salary, I think, all the way up to like $5 million, and then spread $14.5 million over the next 5 years. And you would have an insanely low cap hit this year. I think it'd be like $7 million cap hit this year, but you would carry a $14 million cap hit next year, and then I think it's like $3 or $4 million in the following years of however the math works. So again, we can fit him under the cap, and we can do a lot of cap manipulation to get him under contract, especially with the looming of we're going to restructure CJ Mosley the day that we're allowed to. Remember that we restructured CJ Mosley last year after the draft. My expectation is that we're going to do the same thing after the draft as well. So again, we're going to be able to fit all these guys under the salary cap and keep our team, and we still have space to go out and get guys. Like, we're not dead in the water yet. We still have a ton of ways that we can create cap space. And so I absolutely think that the New York Jets should be all in on DeAndre Hopkins. I would love to bring him in here and get Garrett Wilson a true running mate, because I think Garrett Wilson and DeAndre Hopkins would be 1A and 1B. These are two legitimate guys, and they have like different skill sets too, and that's, I think, the really cool part. And you add the fact that you've got Allen Lazard, Denzel Mims, all of these different guys in this wide receiver room that I really like. McCole Hardman. You can have a legitimate wide receiver room for Aaron Rodgers and have a lot of serious threats. And it goes back to that video that I made a couple of days ago. By going out and getting a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, what does this team immediately get? 2 premier pass catchers, the formula that a lot of NFL teams that are having success in the playoffs have created. Let me know what you guys think of all of the cap manipulations and shenaniganery that the New York Jets can do to get DeAndre Hopkins. Are you interested in DeAndre Hopkins? And last but not least, go Jets.